Good afternoon and welcome to today's CFNC Wednesday webinar. I'm so thankful that all of you have decided to join us for today's presentation. Today the webinar is entitled A Network of Support for First Generation Students. Would like to go over some brief information with you before we get started. Each of you has a GoToWebinar control panel. On that panel, if you would like to hide that panel, you can click that reddish-orange arrow, and that will minimize the panel for you so that you can see the presentation today on your full screen with the button right beneath that red arrow. And then if during the webinar you have a question or comment, you may choose to raise your hand using the hand with the green arrow on it. You can also choose to submit questions or comments via the questions box. So you could send in a text version of a question or comment at any time during today's presentation. We will pause at specific moments during the presentation to address any questions or comments that may come in. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll obviously have another moment where you can raise questions and offer comments. For those of you who are choosing to use your computer, mic and speakers, you don't need this information, but I always like to post the phone number and the access code for anyone who would prefer to have audio through their telephone. My name is Gwen Rolak. I am with the CFNC Pathways team, which is a part of the UNC General Administration. I am with CFNC as the Director of Professional Development. In that role, in addition to offering webinars, much like I'm doing today, I also deliver in-person professional development programs to educators, primarily groups of school counselors and career development coordinators, but also college access professionals who might be involved with the advising corps or Gear Up, and others who are involved in helping students access college and then succeed in college. CFNC is a partnership made up of the 6 educational entities that you see represented around the wheel here. My employer, UNC General Administration, as well as the independent colleges and universities and the North Carolina Community College System are all partners within CFNC. The K-12 system, the NC Department of Public Instruction, is another partner. And then the State Education Assistance Authority and College Foundation Incorporated are 2 partners who are involved with the 529 College Savings Program. They're involved with planning and hosting FAFSA Day. We just had FAFSA Day all throughout North Carolina this past Saturday. And they also administer a loan portfolio for the state of North Carolina. A few statistics for you as far as use of the CFNC.org resources. 4 million college applications have been submitted through CFNC, and many of those are to our community colleges. CFNC is the exclusive application for North Carolina's community colleges. And then you can see that 1.6 million electronic high school transcripts have been delivered. Students are submitting transcripts to North Carolina colleges as well as select scholarship programs in the state. The CFNC.org account can begin in middle school. So when students are in 6th grade, they can set up their CFNC account and then maintain that account throughout high school, throughout college, and even into their professional or work lives. There are many resources on CFNC that are tailored to each of those different age groups, middle schoolers, high schoolers, as well as adult learners. And then because that account belongs to the student, if a student transfers schools, the account is still with the student. The student would still have access and would be able to just update their profile within CFNC to their new school. With the CFNC.org account, students have access to the 5 main tabs that you see here. The My CFNC tab is a tab that has a series of portfolios, one for high school planning, one for college planning, one for career planning, and a financial portfolio. As students are completing various tasks within their CFNC.org account, those results are saved in the portfolio so that students are able to return to those results to view their information, to update their information as necessary. Under the Plan tab, there are multiple activities, assessments that students can explore to learn more about careers and colleges that they're interested in. Apply very straightforward, applying to colleges in North Carolina, as well as applying for financial aid, we have that tab there because often students will think that they need to apply for aid at cfnc.org. And so if they do come to CFNC, our site will then, they're able to click and link right out to the FAFSA.gov website. The Pay and Save tabs are of a special interest to parents who often have that question in their minds of how am I going to pay for my child's education. So information on financial literacy as well as grants and scholarships can be found under the Pay tab. And the Save tab is a complete program, enrollment, adding additional funds to the NC 529 program. All of that is contained under the Save tab. For educators, there's the Professional Center. The Professional Center allows educators to monitor, to track their students' progress on a number of various career and college planning tasks, including completing career assessments, applying to college, submitting transcripts. If you do not have a Professional Center account and you would like to have one so that you can monitor your students' activities, you can send an email to cfnc@northcarolina.edu and include the information that's listed there on your screen. So I'm very excited today about the topic, working with first-generation students, and especially delighted to have Teresa Heffelfinger here with us today as our expert presenter. Teresa is a professional school counselor in the Cleveland County Schools, and she and the members of her school community have some really exciting programs going on as it relates to helping first-generation students. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Teresa.
Thank you, Gwen, and I appreciate the opportunity from CFNC to share today just a few ideas of things that we have done to help our first-generation students be more successful and really to feel more comfortable in the college application process. As Gwen said, I am at Shelby High School in Cleveland County. I've been a counselor for a little over 27 years, and a little bit about our school demographics, just to give you an idea of the situation I work in. We have about 55% of our students who are on free and reduced lunch, and about 50% are from some makeup of minority background, but about 92% attend college, either a 2-year or a 4-year school. So it is kind of a challenge. There is a large population, but at the same time, the motivation is there and the expectation is there for them to continue to go on beyond high school. And so our job is to support them in that process. One of the first things I really began to do was kind of challenge my own assumptions as far as first-generation students and think about the process from their perspective. Some of you listening today may be an actual first-generation, or may have been an actual first-generation student, or at the very least, if you had students of your own that went through the college application process, you approached that a little bit differently since you were a professional in the field than you would have if you were first time leading a student through college. So in thinking about that, the best analogy, the best picture I can paint of that, it would be like walking through some kind of an obstacle course where you had to touch each obstacle as you went along, but you were blindfolded along the way, and somebody was shouting directions that you go here, go there, turn left, turn right, backwards, forwards, and that kind of thing. And so I feel like, at least in my practice, a lot of the time it's been about shouting directions that students are telling them things to do and making sure they did those things, but not realizing that they really had no point of reference in order to be successful in going through that process. So what I came to decide about my own practice was that we needed to do some intentional things for those students and not just put the information out there for everybody. So as I began to reflect on that, and I put this picture of the Grand Canyon up there just because I visited there this past summer, and it gave me very clearly a different perspective of the world from this point than maybe some other places that I have been to around the world. And I wanted to have that perspective in my practice as well, to look through their eyes and see what they see and what they struggle with and what they have difficulty with. So in doing that, we began by looking at all the things that we do already for college-bound students. And you can think of your own practice as well, the things that you do, the various ways you disseminate information from, Gwen and I were talking earlier about technology and the ways that we have increased the use of technology to send emails and websites and things like that to communicate with students and parents. It used to be newsletters that we would send out, and even still I'll fall back on a snail mail occasionally to send that out. Going in and doing classroom guidance and individual guidance and conferences and parent nights and that whole conglomeration of things to go through all of those activities related to applying to college. And then finally, even at times incorporating outside programs like the Gear Up program. If you're not familiar with Gear Up, it is a national program, stands for Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs. It's a grant program for low-income middle and high school students, and basically it's a way of delivering those services to first-generation students. So these are all things that we were doing as typical activities for the seniors and for their families to get them all through the process. But what I realized, even in spite of how many things that is and how many things you all do on a daily basis to lead those students through, we were still just throwing the information out there, giving them all the information possible, and expecting them to navigate through the process themselves. And they still had no point of reference, no real support system in place that they could directly call upon. And as well as our time is very limited with our course loads these days, our caseloads, and the number of students that we have. So I felt like we needed to put some more specific, more intentional activities and people in place to support these students. My first kind of aha moment came as I went to a Gear Up conference in New York City in 2012. And basically, the point of the conference was to share ideas across the network of schools that participated in Gear Up to see the kinds of things they were doing and what was making a difference. And because we do have a large population of first-generation students, again, a lot of what we had been doing as a part of that program was what I sometimes call kind of a shotgun approach. Again, we put it out there and hoped that everybody picked up on it in addition to the first-generation students. But what I really saw at the conference was individual students and groups of students who were directly impacted by certain activities and by targeted activities by individuals, community stakeholders, teachers, parents, other students who directly had an impact on those students with the things that they had done in their schools. It was not so much of a shotgun approach and let's put it all out there, but it was some more direct intervention with these particular students. And so that conference and watching those students share challenged me to come back and say, okay, what we're doing, yes, we have a high percentage of students attending college, but I'm not sure that we're really supporting our first-generation students as we should with as much information and direct information as we could in order for them to be more successful and to feel better, I think, along the way as well. So I began to consider what I could do. And as you're probably thinking already, my first thought was, oh my goodness, how can I do anything else? How can I add something to my already heavy load of responsibilities? But what I have found through the years, I'll say this part up front, it has really made my job easier in some ways because the students are taking on more responsibility and I'm including more people in the network of folks that are supporting the students. So in general, once I've gotten things rolling, it has really helped our overall comprehensive program be better. So I began to look, to start with, at what we already had in place at our school. Part of Gear Up was designed to create a college-going culture at our school. And again, I'm sure these kinds of things you're already doing. But I simply went to that drawing board and said, okay, what are we doing to across all grade levels, 9 through 12, for everybody, what are we doing to create that college-going culture, and then how can I make that more specific to these first-generation students? So one of the biggest things we did to make it, actually put it out there in front of them, was begin a program called Making Tracks to College. Our mascot is a lion, and so we did paw prints down the hall. You could adapt that in any way that would fit with your particular school. But as a student is accepted to college, they bring in a copy of their acceptance letter to the guidance office, or their email, as they are most of the time now. And once they bring that in, they create a paw print with their name and the name of that college. It doesn't have to be the college they wind up attending. It's just that they have applied and been successful in being accepted. We purchased inexpensive flash drives, and so with their first college application acceptance letter, we give them a flash drive that they can keep. It has our logo on it and everything. And then we make announcements about once a week. Our principal makes the daily announcements, and I write up the announcement. The following students are making tracks to college, and we celebrate with them that they've been accepted to these universities. The other thing that it does, aside from helping the students feel accomplished in their acceptance, is when you see that line of paw prints grow down the hallway, the students in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade look at that line grow and see those names and the names of those colleges, and it helps encourage them, well, if they can do this, I can do this too. Look at the names of these schools, look how many seniors are going, and it really has helped to add to the college-going culture of our school. A couple of the other things that we do that I'm sure you do as well, having bulletin boards around with maps showing where the seniors will attend, and all those kinds of things that we typically do. I'm skipping over the mentoring to talk about that in just a little bit, but you know, encouraging the underclassmen to talk to the seniors about why they've selected colleges and things, I think is also important. But the last bullet here on this slide talks about some seminars that we do. We do them on PSAT Day. So on that Wednesday, we give the PSAT at school on that Wednesday in October. And the other grade levels do other activities. Some years the 9th grade does a career fair. The 10th grade may do the plan that day. We tear the whole school day up on that day. And what the seniors do during that time, that morning from like 8 to 11:30, is they attend seminars. And I have seminars designed for the little parts of the application process that maybe we don't get to spend enough attention on, like interviewing skills, or the community college comes out and does some sessions on what they have to offer. The military comes out and does sessions on what they have to offer. We do a session on essay writing. We have the computer lab open so that students can go in and actually work on applications in the computer lab. Of course, we use our teachers to man those sessions and lead those sessions. We do an ACT, SAT review time, and they're about 55 minutes per session, and each student can attend 3 sessions during that morning. And so they, what I do is I survey them a couple of weeks before the event and get them to choose their first, second, and third choice as to what they want their sessions to be, and then I schedule them so that they can have a class list for that day of seminars. Some of the area nursing schools come. We have admissions officers come and describe the process from the admissions point of view. What's it like to live in a college dorm? I have usually some of our first-year teachers come and describe that. So it gives all students but as I said, the first-generation students are in there, some direct time to deal with some of their questions, some of their fears, some of the things that they need help getting over. And as I said, this was already sort of in place at our school, a time when we needed something to do, so it wasn't really difficult to implement on top of that. College fairs, college application week through CFNC. During that time, we have some activities for underclassmen too. So as I said, all those things that you do to create a college-going culture, just make sure those first-generation students are plugged in. From there, I kind of began to work on what our direct interventions could be with those students. First of all, you have to identify who you're talking about, and that can be a little bit of a challenge. If I know that they're on free and reduced lunch and they've applied for SAT fee waivers, then generally I can ask them questions and kind of interview them, find out what their parents do, and get an idea if they're considered first generation. I'm pretty careful about throwing that label around because I don't think that's necessarily important. It's just, do they have a support system to guide them through the college process, or do they not? That's the main thing that I really try to find out. I also survey students at the beginning of the year, and I can get the information that way. We have discovered that parent education level is one of the fields available in PowerSchool. So far, I don't think we are completely tracking that information, but that's a possibility in the future. And in the last PowerSchool training I went to, it would be possible to pull that out and actually pull a list of students who are identified as first generation or whose parent education level was not beyond college or not beyond high school, so that we would have an actual list of that. But as I said, the main goal is to identify students who need a support system, because some of them may have parents who've gone on to college, but for a variety of reasons their family is not in the picture or not able to be a support system for them. I also ask teachers to make recommendations if they have students in their classes from the past who they feel like would benefit from some direct support in their college application process, and I add those to the group as well. The next thing that I did was look at what program was already in place in our high school. You may have an advisement group or a homeroom or smart lunch or whatever you call the practice that you have where you meet with students periodically. We already had an advisement group in place that met once a week for 30 minutes. Every faculty member was assigned what we called future fusion group of about 12 to 15 students. So instead of me being randomly assigned a group of students to work with, I went to my principal and asked, could I identify the first generation college students and intentionally have them assigned to my advisement group. Now, of course, that messed up the alphabetical order that we all rely on for doing things, but it still provided me a way to meet with those students every week. In that program of advisement, we had a curriculum that was established. I worked on it 1 year, but different folks worked on it. And a lot of college activities were designed to be carried out in that advisement group. But with my own group, I devised my own curriculum and determined what activities the students really needed to do and practice so that they would be more comfortable with the college admissions process. My fusion group met in a computer lab, so it was easy for us to get onto CFNC and do many different activities through CFNC to show them how to do an application, to show them how to send a transcript, to actually apply for a PIN number when it came time for financial aid. There's some games in CFNC in the financial part, a financial literacy part, and we would play those games and talk about financial literacy. I would have them apply for the Golden Leaf Scholarship right there from homeroom. So we could specifically do all of those things with me, the counselor, right there in the room with them, and I could follow through and make sure that they did all of those activities during that time. One of the ways that I discovered how to, what activities to do was this beginning of the year survey that I did to ask them a little bit about themselves, what colleges they were interested in going to, and then what accounts they had and things like that, so that I would know exactly what those students needed. We called our group Going Above and Beyond, the GAB group, and so in that way I could design the curriculum that they could best benefit from during the course of that time. So I devised that group, and I met with them once a week, or as we met with Fusion. One of the very first things that we did was to set goals for the year. I told my students, I did not tell them they were a group of first-generation students that I had pulled together so I could help them go to college. I told my students they were a group of student leaders, which they were. They were fairly high in academics with over a 3.5 GPA, certainly college-bound material, good, strong leaders. Some were athletes, some were student leaders, some weren't. Some were just very quiet, but they were good, strong students. And I told them that I needed their help to inspire their peers to get ready for college, that I needed their help in getting the message out for the things that they needed to do, that I couldn't reach everybody, and they listened to the peers more than they listened to me. So I asked them that as I instructed them on the various steps of the program, if they would go out and share that with their peers. And they did. It was a wonderful thing. They would go out and share, and then they would bring their friend in and say, now she needs help with this SAT registration or whatever. But it really helped me in reaching students. And as I said, they listened to their peers probably much more than they listened to me. But one of the first things we did, as I discussed that with them, was we set goals for them for the year. I didn't really think a whole lot about that when we initially did it. I did it kind of to set my curriculum and to keep me on track. We said, okay, we're going to apply to 3 colleges or 5 colleges by December the 1st. We're all going to take the SAT by November the 1st. We're going to all apply for financial aid by March the 1st. We're going to all apply for a scholarship by February 1st. Those were the kind of goals that we set. And we kept track of those. When it would get to be November 1st or the week before that, I'd say, okay, is everybody registered for the SAT? And they would be honest with each other. They would talk to each other and say, now get on here, you need to do this. And they would encourage each other. And then when we would meet those goals, if they all did take the SAT, then we would have donuts for breakfast, or I would bring them a candy bar or a sucker or something to celebrate that we had met the goals. As I said, I didn't really think it was a huge deal for them, but at the end of the year, we did an end-of-the-year evaluation, and I'll see if I can pull that up. I think I've just gone on to the next slide. We did an end-of-the-year evaluation, and many of the students wrote that that was one of their best things. That was one of the things that helped them more than anything else, was that they actually had goals and they had targets that they could work toward and to see progress in, because to them it's just a great big blurry mess ahead of them and they don't know how to get through it. But by setting the goals, it was broken down into little pieces and they could see themselves making some progress. So it really turned out to be a good thing. College visits are something that I added this year. We changed, as with any good program, you get it going and then they change everything on you. We did not have advisement groups this year. We took that out of our schedule because of the new schedule we went to. And so I was so concerned that I wasn't going to be able to have this contact with those first-generation students again, that I established groups. Small counseling groups. We still called ourselves GAB groups. I have 4 GAB groups, 3 of them academic, and 1 is a group of athletes that I added to the mix because they need a little bit different support than the others. They need to know the NCAA clearinghouse. They need to know that whole process. So I have 4 GAB groups this year. I meet with them every other week, so 2 groups meet one week, 2 groups meet the next week, and we go back and forth and rotating through the periods. I decided that one of the things that they really need to do that they don't get to do, especially as first-generation college students, is to get on those campuses and visit. And for many of my students, there just wasn't a way to do it. When we had the Gear Up program, we would take a whole grade level of students on a college visit. But when the funding for that went away, so did paying for a college visit. Your school may be fortunate enough that you might be able to still do to do college visits. But I at least decided to take my small group on a college visit. Appalachian State University was very kind to us and allowed us to come and do a group tour during the day. It actually snowed that day. I did ask my students to pay a little bit. They had to pay $20 per student, and I told them if that was a challenge to them to come privately and let me know. And we did have a couple that we took care of. But it gave them a little bit of a financial investment in the trip, helped us to pay for gas. We took a small bus, and one of the teachers here drove it, and it was wonderful to see their faces actually on a campus. And like I said, it was a gray, cold, windy day, and boom. But to see their faces light up and to see them be able to see themselves on that campus and realize that they could go there. Every one of them was admissible. So it was worth the whole trip to do that and to take the time for school to do that. So I think doing that just with them, because we could really target the conversation with them to things that we would assume that we might all know, but I had let the leaders of the tour at App know that these were first-generation students, and so they were able to tailor that visit to some of their specific needs. So I mentioned earlier that we did some mentoring, and this is something that we have added just this semester. We are calling our program the Lion's Share, and I'm developing one-on-one peer tutors. They are seniors who have been through the process and been through it successfully, been accepted to college, and that sort of thing. And I'm pairing them with juniors that I've identified as my potential students for next year, potentially first generation or at least in need of some support. I met with the seniors that I identified and trained them and talked to them about all the things they needed to cover. They even shared some ideas with me that I didn't think about, that they recognized as a challenge, and they felt like they needed to help the juniors understand. So we got them trained and got ready, and then we had 2 weeks of snow and ice, so we're a little behind in implementing this process. But we are getting the parent permission for the juniors to participate in the Lion's Share. And the idea will be that they will meet with this person 4 to 5 times between now and the end of the year, pulling them out of elective classes and meeting with them to just give them some firsthand experience and help them to see what those steps are that they may not have understood at that point. So that provided the one-on-one perspective. And again, it helped me while I had to organize the program. I know that all these students are having individual sessions much more than I would ever have had time to have pulled them in and meet with them. So it provided that direct target experience with those students. So Gwen, I wanted to stop right there and see if anybody had a question before I talked about the after graduation part of the support.
I don't see any questions that have come in via text right now, but if anyone has a question, again, just to remind you, you can post that question in the questions box, or you can post to the chat box. If you need to verbalize a question, just raise your hand, and I can acknowledge you that way. So are there any questions at this time? We'll pause for a moment here to see if any question comes in. Or comment, I should say that as well. So if you have a comment that you'd like to share, we definitely are open to hearing that as well. Okay, we'll continue, and then if you do have a question, send it at any time, and we'll pause in a moment and see if there are any questions.
Okay. The second part was really a reflection, again, that I had that we do a pretty good job supporting the students as they get through the college application process, but then all of a sudden they're faced with, I've got to get ready for college and actually go on the campus, and what do I do now? And that story actually happened on May the 1st, about 3 o'clock. One of my GAB students came to my door, 4.0 student, star soccer athlete, wonderful young man, and he came running in my office and said, is it too late for me to go to the community college? And I sort of looked at him and like, why in the world would you be planning to go to the community college? Not that I have a problem with community colleges, but we had worked so hard to get him into the four-year school, and he said, I haven't heard anything about financial aid, about it. I don't know anything about what to do from here. And he had not gone into his account at the particular university he was accepted to, didn't know about the enrollment deposit. Of course, it was due May the 1st. So we, through a couple of hours that afternoon of contacting the university and some very generous administrators who paid his enrollment deposit, we were able to get him connected. And in the middle of that conversation, I said, and what are you going to do for sheets for school? And he said, I'm going to take the ones off of my bed at home. And I just couldn't get that off of my mind. The end of the story is he is at that university and doing very well, and I'm so delighted to see his updates on Facebook as he has gotten there. But I really just took a step back and said, you know, we're doing them a disservice by getting them to this point and then not helping them move a little bit more down the road to prepare them for that transition. So I asked, what else do they need, and what other resources do I have that can help meet those needs, because I certainly can't do everything by myself. And so we began a Pack a Trunk for College program. Initially, from that homeroom, I had 3 students that I knew really, really needed assistance that couldn't provide those things. So the first thing I did that first year was call 3 area churches and said, I have a student who needs help getting ready for college. Can you help me? And I came up with a list of items that, just the general basic items that a student would need in order to start college. And I gave that to them, and they packed the trunk for those students. And when I was able to call that student or their family and say, I have a trunk of things here for you, it was like Christmas all over again for those students to not have to deal with that financial burden and to be able to go on and enjoy at least not having that to worry about as they started college. After that first year, I knew that we needed to go a little bit further with that process, and I had a parent who fortunately had a grant program through her church, and she was able to apply for that grant, which was a couple $1,000, and we were able to help 13 different families have a trunk for college the next year. The really exciting part about that next year, though, was we didn't just stop with filling a trunk of some things they needed and giving it to them. The families were able to adopt those students. I did an application process where the students wrote where they were going to go to college, kind of what their favorite colors were, just some things about themselves, and gave me permission to share their email address and their contact information. I then shared that information with the families that adopted them, and many of them did it different ways, but some of them even took the mother and the student shopping for the things for college, which I thought was really neat to include the family of that first-generation student in that process. Some of them continued to write cards, emails, contacts through social media, just supporting them beyond sending them with a trunk full of things or even sending them a gift card occasionally. but it's been more that encouragement along the way as they actually get on that campus and start this process that I think has really been important. So it increased those mentoring opportunities to other stakeholders in the community. Some of the people that participated were parents of the graduates that actually knew them, and I felt like they already had a vested interest in those students. Some were parents of previous students whose students had already gone through school and now they wanted to give back because somebody had helped them along the way. Some were retired teachers from here who felt like this was a way that they could continue to contribute to the education system. Some were actually teachers here. And this year, a social worker has gotten involved in helping to raise some funds to help us provide the trunks. Our teachers paid $20 to be able to wear blue jeans on Fridays, and it went into the Pack a Trunk Fund so that we can supplement some of those trunks at the end of the year. So our goal this year is to provide about 20 trunks to these students to help them, and then not only to provide them with those resources, but to also develop relationships with people who can mentor them through that process. I have one student whose story always sticks in my mind, who had no family support as she went to college. And we helped her through the process, and she would constantly have a meltdown here and there. I can't go, I can't make it, I won't be able to pay for it. And eventually got there. We were able to take her shopping, get her the things that she needed, and know that she was successfully there. But now, 4 years later, she's getting ready to graduate. And through the years, I couldn't tell you how many text messages there has been. Oh my, I'm worried about this test tomorrow, or I did really well on this test tomorrow, and we celebrate. I just need to give up, I can't do this, and she needed encouragement. And this has happened to multiple students, and our faculty has taken them over. And it just has reminded me over and over again that they need support beyond us getting them to college. And even though I know that we can't do all of that, if we engage a number of other people in the community to help us with those things, churches and other folks, as I've already mentioned, then they have a greater chance of success, not just getting to college, but getting through college and actually being able to graduate and get out and get a job. So the last slide is just, I know you guys have ideas. This is certainly not an exhaustive list. The idea, again, in implementing this in my practice is just simply to provide intentional strategies to support those students, one-on-one, small group, things like that that help not just bombard them with information about how to get to college, but to actually hold their hand and take them through that obstacle course and help them touch all the bases and know that they've done it and done it right. Some of the best ideas come from the students. When you ask them at the end of that senior year, what did you not know how to do? What were you afraid of? Where did you need help? What else could we have done? Things like that. They're able to share that at the end of the year, and it helps us to guide and tweak a little bit of the things that we do. Also asking up front of juniors, what is it that you feel like you don't know? What are you scared of? What do we need to make sure that we cover? And how's the best way to do that? As I said, sometimes I still send snail mail because some of ours don't have internet access at home. So sending out email newsletters and email scholarship lists and things like that don't necessarily reach our first-generation college students because they don't have any way to access that. So I have to still rely some on the other conventional ways of getting information out. And then I think one of the best ways is just to try to put ourselves in their shoes and think, what if I were trying to go through this the first time? I have two older daughters who graduated from college, and I have a son that's a junior now. And the first time I tried to get on the SAT website and upload a picture with him, he was doing it, but I understand why our first-generation college students get frustrated with that process. I mean, just doing those things like that, I know when I'm telling them to go do it and they come back and they're frustrated, I have to remember it is a very frustrating process for them. And walking them through that slowly and just sitting next to them, reading their essays, things like that, they're scared to push the button because they're really scared of the unknown. So anything that we can do to be supportive of that group of students in particular, I think is really a part of our professional responsibility, and it aids to the success of our overall program. So Gwen, I don't know if that raised any additional questions or if anybody has other ideas they would like to share, but that is what we have in place to support our first-generation college students here at Shelby High School.
Awesome. Yeah, there is one question, and I just will remind everyone that if you do have a question, please feel free to raise your hand electronically or to send in a text version of your question, and I will be happy to acknowledge it. But one question that's come in is how many students were in the first generation group during when you all had the advisement, and then did you have any other criteria for students to be a part of that group other than being first generation?
That was a very difficult process because, as I said, in our advisement groups, most teachers had 12 to 15 students in a group. And when I was trying to select mine, I wanted 20 or 25 because I didn't want to turn anybody down. But I did look at GPA just because I wanted them to be assured of being realistic in their college acceptances. We were looking at 4-year universities or not looking at 2-year. While there was probably a need for that, I just was one person and couldn't do both. So I did look at GPA. It wasn't necessarily a criteria. I looked at motivation. You know, did they want to go to a 4-year college? Were they working toward that? And then really, truly just, was there a family support system? As I said, I didn't actually go to them and say, did your parents go to college? But I knew from teacher recommendations and surveys and conversations I had with them that they didn't have a support system in place for whatever reason, and they needed that extra support.
Are there any other questions at this time or comments? I'd send a message to say if you have ideas of how you're supporting first-generation students in your schools, I definitely would love to hear those. I receive a lot of newsletters electronically, and first-generation students is always a popular topic. I know there was a big piece in the Atlantic very recently, and lots of other publications are looking at, how do we, not just, K-12 folks, but also higher ed folks, how do we support our first-generation students? It's what Teresa's talking about, not just getting them to college, but helping them get through college. They actually earn a credential, much like the student whose story she shared with us. So we would love to hear other ideas that you all may have, or if you have other questions, we can take those as well.
And Gwen, I will say I think that's important in our communication with the higher ed folks. If I call, such as I did with Deshaun or other students that I call with, and they are a first-generation student, I make sure I say that in the conversation because I do feel like they have some things in place that they can offer those students if they're aware. They don't know it any more than we do. So I make sure that I identify that so that they can connect them to any other supports that they have as well.
Right. That's very important. I really appreciate you sharing that. You're right. They don't know unless someone tells them. So that's good information. Well, I don't see other questions coming in. It may be that I know sometimes a question will come as soon as we get off the call today, and if that happens, you'll have some emails from me because I will send instructions on how you can get a certificate for participating in today's webinar, and you can definitely send those questions then. I do have a comment coming in from Tammy who says, I just want to thank you so very much for all of this information. It was really helpful.
Thank you. And I apologize my handouts didn't come up on the screen, but I'll be happy to share any of those. I can make I meant to make a slide with email address and failed to do that. I can make that available for Gwen, and I'll be happy to share any of the handouts or any information that I have.
That would be great. So again, everyone, plan to be on the lookout in your email for a message from me within the next 24 hours with some follow-up information, and then you can reach out to me if you would also like to get copies of the templates that Teresa has already created for the GAB group or some of the activities that she's done at her school. I would personally like to also echo Tammy's comments and say thank you so much for all of this information. I took quite a few notes just because I thought these are really good ideas, and I think I've told you this already. When I hear good ideas, I definitely like to share them. I don't feel like we should keep them to ourselves. So I definitely want to share these with school counselors and college access folks who are in my network. The teachers paying the $20 for jeans on Friday, that one was really nice. I like that.
That went over well.
Yes. So again, Teresa, thank you so much. I know you will continue the wonderful work that you're doing there at Shelby High School, and your students are the better for it. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.